The elections are finally over, and the wait for January 20th begins. Donald J. Trump will be inaugurated, and his select establishment will be instated. Rudy Giuliani as Attorney General.
I see you as Attorney General.
Well, I sure know the Justice Department.
Okay, that's a yes.
Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York City, who's one of the biggest suspects in the 9/11 false flag, is in Trump's inner circle and is looking likely to be our next Attorney General. Giuliani has been connected to the pre-planning and destruction of all the evidence left behind after the collapse of the Twin Towers on 9/11. Why on earth would someone who is going after the criminal establishment bring someone responsible for 9/11 into power? Maybe to appease the neocons for the time being? I don't know, and it seems like wishful thinking at best. Don't forget that Donald Trump knows and has admitted he does not believe the official story, something he has now flip-flopped on.
We had a chance after September 11th to be the most popular, for the first time ever, to be the most popular nation on earth, and we blew it. Everything's a lie. It's all a big lie.
I said, how could a plane, even a 767 or 747 or whatever it might have been, how could it possibly go through this deal? I happen to think that they had not only a plane, but they had bombs that exploded almost simultaneously, because I just can't imagine anything being able to go through that wall.
AIPAC and Trump's Jewish inner circle. Many out there believe Trump is the answer to taking down the Zionists embedded in our government, something I have mentioned in other videos and hope is true. Sadly, the evidence does not make that prospect seem very likely.
We love Israel. We will fight for Israel 100%, 1000%. It will be there forever.
Again, we can only hope at this point that somehow it is a ploy used to position himself in power. Representative Mike Pompeo has been selected by Trump as CIA director, and retired General Mike Flynn has been selected as his national security advisor. Pompeo, who serves on the House Intelligence Committee, is popular with the national security hawks in Washington, and his supports resorting to the intelligence community's ability to collect bulk metadata. He is also a firm opponent to the Iran deal and served on the House Special Committee to investigate the Benghazi attacks. Why is Russia being blamed for this?
There's actually a few reasons I think we should go through. The first one is misdirection. So they want everybody to look at the wrong enemy. The Democrats themselves weren't sure exactly how the election was going to go down until it was done. Now that it's done, well, it's a different story, but they've already been going with that Russia story for quite a little while. Additionally, I think they were actually given the information that it was Russia, either via that the hacks came from, or associated hacks came from proxies within Russia, because it's very easy to just blame it on anybody, because that's how you do it as a hacker. You make sure that it can't be tracked back to you by using multiple IP addresses and filtering it through that. So there's always a problem with just identifying who's the source. That they jumped onto it, it seems like they were fed by either the FBI or the CIA, and I would assume the CIA, seeming it's such a highly infiltrated organization that doesn't really stand for the people, and it doesn't really work by any laws or rules. It kind of goes, it's a black ops operation, right?
So what we notice is all this is being directed towards WikiLeaks as the main source of these information leaks, which again are being blamed solely on Russia. But there's an odd thing with WikiLeaks, and I think a lot of us have noticed it, and especially with Trump's ties to certain groups and to certain people. Why does WikiLeaks not accuse Israel?
Just like any good controlled opposition. It does actually accuse Israel, and it does report on Israel, but it never reports anything useful on Israel. WikiLeaks is supposed to have this upstanding that it doesn't report what other people report. It only reports brand new things. But when we look in aspects to, say, 9/11 or Israel, it has never released a single document that hasn't already been available, or that the document released doesn't actually accumulate to any true discovery or unveiling or anything like that. So it does accuse Israel. It just doesn't do it in a manner which has any effect on its political status or its world status or anything else like that, because it's already information that's already out there. So it's not causing a huff and a puff. And it's very strange that a whistle-blowing outlet, as it calls itself, only releases information that's already been released on this one topic.
So with all this, people have been saying for years that the Clintons are just Zionist puppets and they do the will of Israel. And a lot of their actions do seem to play that route. But here we have WikiLeaks releasing this information, and supposedly it's an Israeli proxy. Why is WikiLeaks attacking Clintons that we had always thought was just another puppet for Israel?
Well, because Netanyahu and the Zionists have thrown the Democrats under the bus. They elected the Democrats. They got Obama elected the first time around and the second time around. And through both of his terms, he never acted like the puppet that he was supposed to be, and he never really did anything. And in most cases, he acted like a jerk towards them. At least that's the way they see it. You know, they got him into office. He never turned around and did anything accumulative towards a better deal for them in any aspect, and actually contrary to the way that they already had it. He put his foot in their way, especially with the Iran deal, because now if Iran gets attacked by any country across the planet, even Israel, the United States must intervene in their defense, if militarily be so. It's a defense pact.
It's seemingly, though, Obama and the previous establishments have been going with that Wesley Clark 7 countries in 7 years, although it's been longer than 7 years now, to take out these certain countries leading up to Iran. Is that not what Obama was doing in, like, say, Libya, Syria, along with Hillary Clinton, taking out these countries? Is that something that benefits them more so than it does Israel, or is there some kind of weird thing going on there?
Well, I often find this, especially with all media outlets, kind of disturbing. It doesn't seem like they're on ball about the way that reality works. They think, you know, it's either one side or the other side, and they don't understand that there's ever two sides that do business together, that sometimes it goes awry. So Libya, Syria, all this stuff, so on and so forth, yeah. So Obama's basically tarnished his entire reputation for these wars, for these deals, these little side deals, these pay-for-play schemes of how he got elected. And yeah, he's gone around and he's done them, but at the same time it's tarnished his reputation. So he hasn't always fully supportive of everything that went on directly in Israel, because he was already doing all of their really, really, really dirty work. There's that. So let's start with Obama. His terms were not beneficial for Israel, and Israel elected him. So they feel very betrayed and backstabbed. Additionally, the new person they have up for the second round, well, as I disclosed in the first article that we started talking about this in, if you looked on Israeli news, or you look all over Jewish news, I guess you could say, there was a clear distrust with Clinton, and reiteration over and over and over and again of all the things that she has done wrong, or the reasons why she is untrustworthy. The majority of these reasons, they accumulate to very one simple act that she's done wrong, which she is double dealt. So she's ran over here, she's dealt with this side, and then she's ran over there and she's dealt with that side. And what I mean by that is, she'll go to the Israelis, the Zionists, and she'll tell them everything they want to hear about their genocide of the Palestinians, that it's everything that's great, and they should keep doing it, and blah, 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 so on and so forth. But then she'll run over to the Palestinians, and she'll tell them, no, it's so horrible, Israel is a war criminal, and blah, 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 blah. So she'll play both sides against each other. That's what they really don't like. It's, if you're going to be my friend, but don't double deal me, because I'm a Jew, and I will double deal you worse than you can ever understand. Yeah, the other big thing is, well, Pizzagate. It was brought on because of the WikiLeaks.
Handkerchief code with John Podesta and all these other things that led to the affiliation with John Podesta and people from Comet Ping Pong, John Podesta's brother, and Spirit Cooking, and the Loretta Express, and that lady he was doing spirit cooking with. All these other connections started to come together with WikiLeaks. So what you're saying is WikiLeaks actually implemented these to indict their enemies.
Well, the enemies of their funders, of their backers, the ones that set them up, orchestrate them. some of the articles we've already put, it talks about in clear detail publicly that Julian Assange was not just looking for the backing of the regular kind of donators that the independent media looks for, but he was looking for governments, he was looking for banks, he was looking for private think tanks, he was looking for propaganda agencies to fund him and get his operation on the go. I don't see why it would change any point from here
And
to
another
there.
article that we had covered on our site is that Julian Assange, when he was suspiciously arrested, was bailed by none other than a Rothschild banker affiliate.
Yeah, you got it. Like a direct member of the family. And has even openly acknowledged on the news that he has collaborated with Israel in the past about what he should report and what he should not report. Mossad, or the Zionists, they sent after their attack dog after the Democrats. And the Democrats feel hurt, they feel betrayed. So they went back with the only move that they could do in the last little bit, which is the UN resolution that came up, and they threw Israel underneath the bus, which is a complete surprise by everybody across the planet that watched that Kerry speech. There's no way that you would ever assume that was going to
that's
happen.
going to be the last question there, but with that and the way that Donald J. Trump is reacting this and other information we've covered, Trump just released a set of tweets. Yeah, we have Trump responding saying, "We cannot continue to let Israel be treated with such total disdain and disrespect."
Yeah. And the ambassador that he appointed to Israel also has a huge amount of investment within these settlements that Obama has just basically, Obama and Kerry have just said, they got to go. They got to disappear. You don't own any land there. And now that he's filled up his cabinet, not even to say anything like the liberals and this and that about the PICs. I just find it hilarious that the entire cabinet is Jewish.
Well, the whole mainstream media was against Trump. I mean, the Clinton establishment was against Trump.
Were they? Mainstream media is against us. How many times do you hear the mainstream media mention us on a news report?
0.
Well, there you go. So how against the mainstream? How much could the mainstream media be against something if they did not omit it, like they do everything else they don't want to disclose?
So that goes back to the old saying, no publicity is bad publicity.
Bad publicity.
Right. And so that leads to Trump becoming an underdog because everybody's against him.
That's the consequence.
And that
the victim mentality is what is going to be superseded upon the population.
So I mentioned in a video right after Trump got elected that he was thinking about bringing Rudy Giuliani, a 9/11 war criminal, into his political establishment. Now, he didn't put him on as Attorney General or Secretary of State, and I think that has to do with some of the backlash that he would get, and I think he found that out. But he did give Giuliani a role in cybersecurity, however large you want to take that as. However, this should be a insane slap to the face to anybody with any sense of morality, regardless if you believe in the 9/11 true story or not. So according to this article by Western Journalism, President-elect Trump is very pleased to announce former Mayor Rudy Giuliani will be sharing his expertise and insight as a trusted friend concerning private sector cybersecurity problems and emerging solutions developing in the private sector. But I don't know about you, but war criminals and friends and trusted and insight expertise, that's not things that you typically say about war criminals. And for those that are like, what? How could this be so? I would advise you to watch a video made by James Corbett of the Corbett Report named 9/11 Suspects Rudy Giuliani. It breaks down all his connections with the 9/11 attacks and why he is responsible. And if you do not believe the 9/11 was an inside job story or if it was carried out by Israel, no worries. I have a video for you as well. We have a video put together by 9/11 first responders that talk about their treatment by Rudy Giuliani and all the lies and things that they caught him in, and they have thrown them to the wayside while they die from diseases from asbestos and other particles and unburnt jet fuel that was at the scene that they were exposed to simply because of his negligence, according to the mainstream narrative. So either way you look at it, this is a bad dude. This is not a dude you say is an expert or is trusted or a friend unless you're caught up in that same game yourself. Yes, folks, the games have begun as Trump says he'll order safe zones for Syria. You remember that thing that Hillary Clinton was wanting? Oh, you might say, oh, that's a no-fly zone. Well, you can't have a safe zone without a no-fly zone. The United States will not go without protecting its assets from the air. And let me reinfer that it is okay to put a safe zone in Syria if you get permission from Syria and its allies first, which include Russia, Iran, and China and the like. But as of today, their position remains the same. But this isn't going to happen, and within the next 90 days, according to Donald Trump, he will be implementing safe zones in Syria. Again, this was the number one reason why I didn't want Hillary Clinton to win. And the number one reason why I didn't want Hillary Clinton to win is because this will spark a world war. It's okay to talk the talk, but you have to walk the walk, Donald Trump. I said I would light the fire, and his feet are shifting, and I'm lighting that fire right now. Now, this radical terrorism comes from Saudi Arabia. It comes from Qatar. It comes from Turkey. We're not going to ban those countries, you see. We're not going to ban immigration from those countries. We're only going to ban the ones that we have affected from these countries, from our policies, from Israel's policies. You see, that's why most of these countries that are banned, we've bombed or want to bomb. Which is why Iran's in there, because Hezbollah is terrorist, even though they're just defending their territory or their allies' territory, not invading anyone. You see, Iran is on this list because Iran is the number one enemy of Israel. We don't have to worry about Iranian terrorists bombing America because Iran isn't a hotbed for Wahhabism like some of these other countries. So the reason Iran is on this list is solely because they are an enemy of Israel. It has been the plot to obtain war with Iran for the longest time. So again, instead of banning the sources of Wahhabism or Salafism as they like to call it, it's all the same thing. We're going to ban these Shia hotbeds simply as a statement to say, you're our enemy, which they have always been their enemy. It's not about Shia, it's not about Sunni, it's about these radical Wahhabists which originate from Israel, from the Jews, and using them as a manipulated force, a proxy army, to take out their enemies, which is anyone that will stand up against the greater Israel project, which is Iran, Syria, Libya, Iraq, even Egypt. This isn't the only policy that Trump enforced today. Trump announced his official start of building a wall. He announced the plans coming soon to build a wall. And the ones that he admired the most, or gave the most praise, was, oh, Israel. Let's listen.
Well, walls work. All you have to do is ask Israel. Walls work if it's properly constructed. Not the walls that these characters, these politicians that we have running our country, who are a disgrace. All talk, no action politicians. They build a wall this big. They drive cars right through it. Walls work. All you have to do is go and see Israel. They will tell you that walls work.
Walls work. Just ask Israel. Ass kissing much there, Trump? Yes, we see. Well, it seems Bibi Netanyahu was pleased by the ass-kissing as President Trump is right. I built a wall along Israel's southern border. It stopped all illegal immigration. Great success. Great idea. Yes, when you encircle the Palestinians with your wall and you keep them trapped, stacked on top of each other, and you bomb them periodically to counter their terrorism, and you go on their land, and when they put up a single ounce of defense, it's terrorism. And then you keep taking their land, you take their land, and every time they want to fight back for 1 ounce, they want to shoot a slingshot at you. Oh, it's terrorism. Yeah, let's just circle them up, keep them trapped in this little teeny area as we steal the rest of their land. Yeah, this is something to admire, according to Trump, which is supposedly America's savior, which he has a lot of the people fooled. And although I put that prospect out there as a possibility, I made it sure that I was still very suspicious of him, and he is showing his full colors just over a week into his office. So we've known for a long time that the goal of Israel is to gain a war with Iran, one of the last opponents to the greater Israel project left in the Middle East. Well, maybe Trump is their front guy. We've already seen some evidence of this, as the UK, the US, France, Australia are going to run war games in the Persian Gulf to simulate confrontation with Iran. I wonder what can promote that confrontation. Check out our article. We'll show you what that confrontation is going to be, and it involves Israel and it likely involves Palestine. And if we go back to Netanyahu, just check out some of the videos he's been posting on his Twitter.
I plan to speak soon with President Trump about how to counter the threat of the Iranian regime, which calls for Israel's destruction.
It calls for Israel's destruction. Yeah, I'm sure they want to bomb the Palestinians and hurt the Palestinians, because it makes sense for them to nuke their own people. Netanyahu also said recently in another tweet that Netanyahu spoke with the U.S. President Donald Trump this evening, in what was a very warm conversation. I bet you it was pretty warm, huh? The Prime Minister expressed his desire to work closely with President Trump to forge a common vision to advance peace and security. Don't you just love it how these elites like to twist words and change up the meaning of words, where peace is actually war and security is actually giving up your freedoms to the state? Peace and security in the region, with no daylight between the United States and Israel. Another one where they're twisting the words. Yes, they say there's no daylight between the United States and Israel. That's because everything will be kept in the dark of the true intentions. Yes, no, this is peace and security. But in reality, it's them searching for war to gain their greater Israel project. The two leaders discussed the nuclear deal with Iran, the peace process with the Palestinians, and other issues. Yeah, something's cooking up. President Trump invited Prime Minister Netanyahu to come to Washington to meet him in February, so this is going to be in a few days. So yes, something is definitely cooking up. And I know a couple of you have mentioned, well, Russia's not going to let this happen. Well, we're just going to have to wait and see. The following is a theory of the Controversial Truth Project. It is based off of research, evidence, and critical thinking. Although this is just a theory, it should not be taken lightly. For a while now, I've been wondering what's going to happen. Embassy to Jerusalem, mass support for illegal settlements, going to shoot Iranian ships out of the water, remove protection from Iran from unjustified attacks by Israel. What's going to happen? What are the steps that will play out? I generally don't like to speculate out loud, or even in private, as speculations have a way of taking a mind of their own and running rampant. Myself, for a while now, have been a bit puzzled about what's going to happen. Not sure which way it will go, which promises are real and which are fake from the start. Donald Trump's comments and commitments stated so far have myself a bit worried, as they seem contradictory if full context is taken into account. No more forced regime change or meddling in the interest and affairs of other nations is along the lines of what Trump has been saying, which gets me wondering, how is he going to do that while supporting Israeli settlements in violation of international law built within Palestinian borders? You see, the banter thrown around is that Israel is fighting for its legitimacy and recognition, but it's actually not. Because the Arab states have all recognized Israel since the 1960s. Zionists demand all peoples give them legitimacy, but that's not an international law that anyone must abide to. It's just a demand of a want. So Israel has been recognized since long before my birth. The only people who have refused recognition is the Palestinians and their state, which is why Israel builds the settlements at a conquering rate, making this not an occupation but an annexation, which is a war crime under international law. It's essentially what Hitler wanted to do to the Jews, but now the Jews are doing to the Palestinians. This process of annexation is the sole reason for the repeated UN resolutions, and with each condemnation, the annexation gets worse in an act of collective punishment by the Zionists against their neighbors, the Palestinians, over and over again. From what it seems, the entire show is a charade, a magician's game to fool the gullible into looking left while the magicians are moving right. As such, the United States has been notorious for using false flag attacks to give substantial justification for retribution, guided by public support for the emotional response invoked. The moving of the embassy is starting to seem a little too convenient, as it would put it in a prime location with cover story being easily orchestrated from upset people in the area. Here are some things to note. They know by moving the embassy there, it will be at a higher risk. They know that they can sell the attack of the new embassy as an attack of aggression from the Arab direction. They know Saudi Arabia does not fund the resistance against Israel, which funds terrorism worldwide. They know Iran does support moderate militias, which have been well documented and in some cases openly admitted. My only question here is, how long will it be before the embassy is attacked by Western nations proclaiming it was Iran, and how long? I see this as a rather quick event, and the sell will go something along the lines of this. Trump and Russia will keep up the absolute best of relations. The ambassadors for Russia to its allies will be murdered or compromised, as they already have been. The embassy will move to a new location in sequence with the new expansion of settlements. The embassy move and the new expansions will go with the go-ahead of the United States and will be greatly condemned worldwide. The condemnation will turn to rioting and protesting. The embassy will be directly attacked, leading to an extensive loss of life. The attack of the embassy will be followed by American intervention. Trump will proclaim it is the result of Iranian-funded terrorism and deem it as an act of war. He will sell justification to dissolve the mutual defense treaty signed within the Iranian nuclear power deal that was signed between Obama and Iran. Israel will attack Iran once the pact is down, claiming justification with the same evidence used by the USA to support dissolving the defense treaty. Trump will hold off Russia and the world under a new slogan of something like, "Stay out of the matters of other nations," or "It's not our business and Israel has a right." Russia will protest, but Trump will argue Russia must stay out of it or the United States will come to the aid of Israel. The war will not last long. It will be quick and used to take the rest of Palestine, along with greatly damaging Iran's capabilities and setting them back generations. And lastly, ground forces will not be Israeli, but instead something like ISIS, Daesh, or some kind of new mask worn by NATO-backed terrorist armies, which we have already seen over and over again.
Donald Trump is going to war for Israel. For Israel. The most incredible things are happening. Never before has a president been so incredibly pro-Israel.
Yes, I think he said it best there. Donald Trump is going to war for Israel. This is what it seems like it's lining up for. Giuliani spends a whole week in Israel, hanging out with Netanyahu and the gang, only to come back to this press conference where Donald Trump is acting senile, where he doesn't even see Giuliani sitting right in front of him, when Giuliani then proceeds to kiss Israel's ass hardcore.
Rudy's very much of an expert on cybersecurity. It's been a very important thing to him and to what he does, and maybe I'll ask Rudy to say a few words.
Well, thank you very, very much, Mr. President. First of all, congratulations on what is in fact a historic start of an administration. I've never seen so much done.
He was right in front of him. I don't know what to say about that, but okay, continuing on.
We can search around the world, including in countries like Israel and places where they're doing a lot of advanced cybersecurity analysis. We can look for long-term solutions. So here, you're addressing not only a national security problem, but you're addressing the fastest growing form of crime in America, which is cyber theft.
Along with more Israeli praising there, who would have guessed it? Donald Trump and his administration are already making war threats to Iran. Trump was asked by reporters Thursday what he might do after the recent Iranian missile test and the sea strike by Houthi rebels against a Saudi ship in the Red Sea, while Flynn did not specify what exactly was entailed by the warning to put Iran on notice. Trump confirmed Thursday that anything is possible. Nothing is off the table, the president said when pressed on whether a military option hasn't been considered. Retired General Flynn called out Iran for its destabilizing behavior and said that Trump has severely criticized Obama's nuclear arms deal with Tehran. The National Security Advisor hinted that Iran is now feeling emboldened due to the weak and ineffective negotiations. Trump is contemplating a whole range of options, including harsher economic sanctions, which, as we all know, only leads to suffering of the people, not the administration, which isn't deserving of sanctions to begin with. If we look at some of Trump's tweets here, Iran has been formally put on notice for firing a ballistic missile, which we do that all the time, and who's going to put us on notice? Should have been thankful for the terrible deal US made with them. Iran was on its last legs, ready to collapse until the US came along and gave it a lifeline in the form of the Iran deal, $150 billion. Well, look who's talking there, Donald J. Trump. Look at the United States. We are astonishingly deep in debt. Unpayable debt. Our shackles are firmly attached to Israel, as you may know. So again, more hypocrisy, more threats of war, more ass-kissing for Israel, and now we have this holy war type situation where you have Christians on the bandwagon for war, calling for war with the Muslim world, with Donald Trump leading the way with his saber. Let's listen to more of what the Christians have to think about this.
God's light is shining on America right now, and it's because Christians stood up and they voted in those polling booths, and also because of Donald Trump's just absolutely incredible stance for Israel, recognizing Jerusalem as the eternal, indivisible capital of Israel. Now, this is what happened recently. I'm sure you saw this particular news story. We want to talk about it, and we're going to talk about what Trump did afterwards. But did you know that literally hours before Donald Trump on January 20th was sworn in at the inauguration to officially become the President of the United States, hours before that, President Barack Obama, he literally sent $221 million to the Palestinians, the terrorists.
The terrorists. I thought these people were supposed to be Christians. In 2009, a U.S. corporate-funded think tank known as the Brookings Institution created a policy paper entitled Which Path to Persia? Options for a New American Strategy Towards Iran. In this paper, they laid out the path to achieving war with Iran, using deception and any means necessary. Today in 2017, under the Trump administration that has shown high favoritism towards Israel, it seems as if we are following this paper to a T. So following lead on this paper that was written in 2009, we have now enlisted new sanctions based on completely false and imaginary justifications. In many cases, these were completely fabricated. The new sanctions target 13 individuals and 12 businesses with cooperation with Iran. Again, sanctions only hurt the people and not the governments themselves. The newly appointed Secretary of Defense, which should be reality called the Secretary of Offense, given the US's stance in the political ring. Iran is world's biggest sponsor of state terrorism. This is a complete moronic and idiotic statement, given that the world's largest sponsorship of state terrorism is Israel, the United States, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Qatar, Turkey, United Arab Emirates, Czech, and so on and so forth. Iran only defends itself and its allies, and I could prove that to you over and over again. Plenty of videos up on our channel about that. Please check it out. These kind of statements are only proving the obvious goal of reaching a conflict with Iran. It is not the United States' goal, this is Israel's goal. As now the puppet government of Trump has been established, this has been a gateway for Netanyahu to continue his reign of terror on the Palestinians. And it's not even Netanyahu, it's really the Zionists in charge of that establishment that are pulling the strings. Again, Netanyahu is just a figurehead just like Trump and can be replaced if it benefits their needs, which is a possibility we've mentioned in the past, which might explain the investigations of corruptions that are now going on with Netanyahu. But nevertheless, the target for war with Iran will continue as planned. Without skipping a beat, Israel is now passing a bill that will retroactively legalize Jewish settlements. Yes, in defiance of the 1967 agreement made by the UN to divvy up the territories between two very well-defined lines, is now legalized on the Israeli side as they continue to occupy and terrorize the Palestinians under their own imaginary legal merits. It will not be long until Palestine is completely wiped off the map. But apparently this is the right thing to do in Israel's eyes, and they will continue to do it until somebody steps up, and we can only hope. Well, here's the most important story this week you probably haven't heard about yet. Donald Trump is in talks with Arab allies to form an anti-Iran coalition, citing 5 nations involved in the discussions. The anti-Iran coalition would bring together Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Israel, Egypt, and Jordan. Why is this important, you might ask? On January 29th, 2017, we published a video, which is based off of an article by Seth and Haven on the Controversial Truth Project, that Israel and the United States were setting forth a plan to obtain war with Iran. So it seems that our predictions keep coming true before our very eyes, as the path to war is very obvious and has been laid out. And if we continue reading the article here, other Arab nations may also join the alliance, which is expected to share intelligence with Israel to help counter their mutual foe, Iran. They've been asking diplomatic missions in Washington if we'd be willing to join this force that has an Israeli component, one unnamed Arab diplomat told the Wall Street Journal. Israel's role would likely be intelligence sharing, not training or boots on the ground. They'd provide intelligence and targets. That's what the Israelis are good at. Exactly. That point right there is what led us to this conclusion just under a month ago. As these reporters and journalists often do, is neglect to research the history of Saudi Arabia and Jordan and Qatar and these other nations that have forms of Wahhabism and Salafism, which originate from Israel, from Judaism, which created these subsections of Islam as a form of control mechanism to do what they're doing right now, what they're planning to do, create a proxy army to do the bidding of their masters. This is what's been going on in the Middle East for the past 50 or so years. And just to reaffirm Donald Trump's full-on support of the terrorist state of Israel, this live press conference was recently held as Bibi Netanyahu visited the White House.
Today I have the honor of welcoming my friend, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, to the White House. With this visit, the United States again reaffirms our unbreakable bond with our cherished ally, Israel. The partnership between our two countries, built on our shared values, has advanced the cause of human freedom, dignity, and peace. These are the building blocks of democracy. The State of Israel is a symbol to the world of resilience in the face of oppression. I can think of no other state that's gone through what they've gone.
He can think of no other state that's gone through what Israel has gone through.
And of survival in the face of genocide. We will never forget what the Jewish people have endured.
And I believe that the great opportunity for peace comes from a regional approach, from involving our newfound Arab partners in the pursuit of a broader peace and peace with the Palestinians.
And we have been discussing that, and it is something that is very different, hasn't been discussed before, and it's actually a much bigger deal, a much more important deal in a sense. It would take in many, many countries, and it would cover a very large territory. So I didn't know you were going to be mentioning that, but that's now that you did, I think it's a terrific thing. And I think we have some pretty good cooperation from people that in the past would never, ever have even thought about doing this.
And not just the United States and Israel, but so many others in the region who see eye to eye on the great magnitude and danger of the Iranian threat, then I think we can roll back Iran's aggression and danger. And that's something that is important for Israel, the Arab states, but I think it's vitally important for America. These guys are developing ICBMs. They want to get to a nuclear arsenal, not a bomb, 100 bombs. And they want to have the ability to launch them everywhere on Earth, and including, and especially, eventually, the United States. So this is something that is important for all of us. I welcome the change, and I intend to work with President Trump very closely so that we can thwart this danger.
But Bibi and I have known each other a long time. A smart man, great negotiator, and I think we're going to make a deal. It might be a bigger and better deal than people in this room even understand.
So some of you might be wondering why Donald Trump just signed an arms deal with Saudi Arabia worth $110 billion with an additional $350 billion to be placed over the next 10 years. With Saudi Arabia being the leader in state-sponsored terrorism anywhere in the world, besides Israel, which likes to remain in the shadows. For us, it's very simple. 5 months ago, we laid out the plan Trump and Israel has set forward for Palestine and Iran. In the video, we state that the move of the United States Embassy to Jerusalem would be purposely placed for the cause of another false flag. And with that, it would be blamed on Iran and be used to liquidate the defense pact between the United States and Iran in the Iran nuclear deal. Now, the war that would be waged on Iran would not come from Israeli and US forces, however, it would come from ISIS, Daesh, or some new mask worn by a NATO-backed terrorist army. This was later revamped and confirmed with the meeting between Donald Trump and Netanyahu, where they laid out their plan to set up an Arab coalition which involves Saudi Arabia and other countries, which again are the leading state sponsors in Wahhabism, which is radical Islamic terrorism, if you will. So with that, it becomes more clear what the goal of these defense pacts with terrorists, the same said terrorists that Trump vowed to destroy just months ago. And he even follows it up with these statements in a speech, again in Saudi Arabia.
Bolstered by Iran, Assad has committed unspeakable crimes, and the United States has taken firm action in response to the use of banned chemical weapons by the Assad regime. The Iranian regime's longest suffering victims are its own people. Iran has a rich history and culture, but the people of Iran have endured hardship and despair under their leader's reckless pursuit of conflict and terror. Until the Iranian regime is willing to be a partner for peace, all nations of countries must work together to isolate, deny it. Funding for terrorism cannot do it. And pray for the day when the Iranian people have the just and righteous government they so richly deserve.
A few months back now, I did an article and prediction for the route in which the American-Israeli-Saudi coalition would be moving forward their agenda in the near future. For whatever reason, their plans have changed, and we will go over the telltale signs of what may occur. The prediction originally centered on the U.S. Embassy's move in Israel to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv, territory set aside by the United Nations to ensure no one religion or nation takes ownership over the religious center for the big three Abrahamic religions. The turmoil of such an event would throw the area into chaos, giving way for the opening the West and its Middle Eastern allies so desperately need for their game plan to fall through. A perfect environment for a false flag laid on the shoulders of Hamas and Iran by default. This orchestrated chaos would be followed by an increase of ISIS-Daesh territory taking, moving towards Iran as an end goal. Over the past few weeks, we have seen an ever-growing campaign of false narratives, exportation of responsibility, and deflection of the truth by the Trump administration and Saudi officials. First, we had $350 billion in arms to the Saudis, followed by a charade in which the lead funders, organizers, and exporters of terrorism, all branching from the royal Saudi family's personal sect Wahhabism, blamed Iran for everything they were responsible for across all of history. This mutant version of Islam was held down to the deepest corners of the Muslim world until the turn of the 17th century, when with the assistance of Western governments, a group of Bedouin Jews from Basra, Iraq, who allied themselves through marriage with the Wahhabi tribe, successfully uprooted and deported the Hashemites, people claimed to be direct descendants from the family of the Islamic prophet Muhammad. Today, as it has always been, Wahhabism is but a tool for the Saudi royal family. This ideology quickly creates disturbed individuals by default, the worst of which the Saudis have dealt with by sending them into the lands of neighboring countries and the world around, knowing all too well the chaos they will create no matter where they go. Additionally, the world around, Saudis have poured enormous amounts of funding into ensuring every madrasa, every mosque, every place a young Muslim may go for ideological guidance is filled with the teaching of Wahhabism, preying upon them in their very times of vulnerability and need. This 300-year-long alliance of the West and a hillbilly group of Arab deviants has caused the world around a price far too high to pay. A price most in the West seem to think is worth paying, or this would have ended a long time ago. More recently, we have also seen the US claiming it is fighting terrorism while at the very same time committing to a fast-track program to retain and rearm Daesh ISIS fighters in Syria, engaging in terrorizing the Syrian civilian population. Muslims, Christians, atheists, and everything in between who won't be converted to the Wahhabist ideology. It seems the increase of Russian anti-aircraft weaponry has set back the Israeli-American air support for Daesh and ISIS fighters on the ground after Trump's active war against Syrian military locations based upon a staged video from a terrorist faction within Syria allied to Al-Qaeda, named the White Helmets, who also received an Oscar from Hollywood for their anti-Assad pro-terrorist propaganda. Well, I assume this was meant to provoke a response from Syria or Russia, which the West did not get. Putin instead used it to further dampen the West's abilities in Syria, supplying more anti-aircraft weaponry, no-fly zones, for which the West has already broken. The most recent event is the demonization and condemnation of Qatar, a nation in which has never been exactly in line with the Western agenda, giving assistance to Hamas and refusing to support Saudi-supported puppet governments in the area. The Qataris admit their collaboration with the Gulf states in supporting terrorism was originally to topple dictators in the region, but separated upon the point of how things should go into the future. The Saudis supporting fragile authoritarian regimes like their own, and from what I can gather, the Qataris wanted some sort of subverted democratic systems. Sounds a lot like they got their hand caught in the cookie jar while at the same time getting in the bed with the devil. A loose end the Saudis have swiftly and quickly turned to topple over. The prediction now goes as follows. The move by the Saudis against Qatar gives the implication that they may be moving in on the ground or some sort of air offensive. They have already invoked a sea and air blockade and travel restrictions, a heavy-handed move, leading one to assume this may not be only the first step. The move comes on the heels of an event which the Qataris are claiming was a hack leading to false messages being posted by the state's social media accounts supporting Hamas. Even with the known association to Hamas, the Qataris are claiming it is just fake news, with Hamas representatives fleeing the country to Malaysia. The Israeli condemnation of armed resistance to their armed occupation has pushed the label of terrorist on Hamas for a number of years now, a title which is found to be illegitimate for those number of years, but Western propagandists continue to make the charging claim. Now more than ever, they are struggling at moving their game plan forward, with piles of oil, possibly larger than the reserves of Saudi Arabia, under Israel and the Golan Heights in specific, which are becoming more well known to the public. I wouldn't be surprised one bit if we were to see Qatar, Hamas, UK attacks all lead into some sort of event in Palestine, giving the Israelis self-proclaimed justification to take occupation over the rest of the territory. Simply put, they need to create such chaos that they can make a land grab while the international community is caught trying to make a decision. When they do, it will already be over and done with. The Qataris claim that they were hacked, which would make this possibly Hegelian dialectics create a false impression capable of justifying just such of an event. In no way, shape, or form is this what I want to happen, but it looks like it is more than likely either this line or one similar to it will be the way that things play out in the near future.
We face this decision not only in North Korea, It is far past time for the nations of the world to confront another reckless regime, one that speaks openly of mass murder, vowing death to America, destruction to Israel, and ruin for many leaders and nations in this room. The Iranian government masks a corrupt dictatorship behind the false guise of a democracy, whose chief exports are violence, bloodshed, and chaos. Its oil profits go to fund Hezbollah and other terrorists that kill innocent Muslims and attack their peaceful Arab and Israeli neighbors. This wealth, which rightly belongs to Iran's people, also goes to shore up Bashar al-Assad's dictatorship, fuel Yemen's civil war, and undermine peace throughout the entire Middle East. We cannot let a murderous regime continue these destabilizing activities while building dangerous missiles, and we cannot abide by an agreement. We cannot abide by an agreement. We cannot abide by an agreement. If it provides cover for the eventual construction of a nuclear program. It is time for the entire world to join us in demanding that Iran's government end its pursuit of death and destruction. It is time for the regime to free all Americans and citizens of other nations that they have unjustly detained. And above all, Iran's government must stop supporting terrorists, begin serving its own people, and respect the sovereign rights of its neighbors. In Saudi Arabia early last year, I was greatly honored to address the leaders of more than 50 Arab and Muslim nations. We agreed that all responsible nations must work together to confront terrorists and the Islamic extremism that inspires them. We will stop radical Islamic terrorism because we cannot allow it to tear up our nation and indeed to tear up the entire world. We must deny the terrorists safe haven, transit, funding, and any form of support for their vile and sinister ideology. It is time to expose and hold responsible those countries who support and finance terror groups like Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, the Taliban, and others that slaughter innocent people.
Donald Trump was definitely being praised by his handler at that speech, who was present to where this article came out. Bibi Netanyahu praises Trump's speech to the UN. Quote, "I have never heard a bolder or more courageous speech." And if you all remember in that video that I just posted recently, we all saw Netanyahu nodding in approval as his BFF was attacking all of his enemies in his speech. So what this speech did is only further embolden Israel in their illegal actions in the Middle East. In fact, Israel came out and announced that they, quote, will act to prevent Iran from establishing permanent military bases in Syria. Now, we've heard them say this many, many times, and it's completely illegal under international law for them to do something like that. But it doesn't stop them from attacking a sovereign nation of Syria, as just the following day, Israeli forces struck Damascus International Airport, which I will remind you is not a military airport. We had the Lebanese prime minister resign supposedly because of assassination plots when he was in Saudi Arabia. He actually came out and stated that Hezbollah was planning to assassinate him. This is very interesting and very contradictory, being that they're the ones that put him in office. Again, he was in Saudi Arabia at the time of the announcement, and it was broadcasted first on the Saudi government-controlled news outlet. Now, right after this, we had Netanyahu come out and say this is a wake-up call to unite against Iran. Go figure. Obviously, this is going to play in the hands of the Zionists that control Israel and much of the United States, and other member states that are the power holders within the UN. Now, what we had after that was the Hezbollah leader say that Saudi Arabia forced the Lebanese prime minister to resign. Now, essentially right when this was all going down, this is when we had the banks of these Saudi clerics starting to freeze, including Prince Alawid, which is the one that funded the Clinton campaign and came out strongly against the Trump administration. Now, on this channel, we've talked many times before about this Zionist versus liberal elites conflict that actually happens within this power structure within the United States and other states around the world. And a lot of people forget that it's not all Zionists that are in control. It's not all liberals that are in control. But it is actually a power struggle with those groups and many other groups as well. Now, obviously, what a Zionist wouldn't want is someone that's going to be funding an opponent that the Zionists are done with. They were done with Hillary Clinton. She was working both sides at the table, playing both groups against each other to benefit her pocketbook. So the Zionists didn't want her in there, didn't want their people in there. That's why we had Pizzagate. That's why we had all these attacks against them, such as Podesta. It was time for somebody that was willing to kiss more ass to be put in power, which was Donald Trump. So, what we had was the freezing of those accounts, and then thusly they were arrested, including 9 other clerics and hundreds of other officials that are most likely sympathetic towards the Clintons and others in that clique. So what we have here is an internal coup going on in Saudi Arabia, which is largely controlled by Zionists. So it's more like a house cleaning more so than a coup, but still a coup nonetheless. And I guess coincidentally, we had a helicopter carrying 8 officials near the Yemen border being either shot down or crashed. I'm still not clear on exactly what happened there. Now, right after they start cleaning house, we supposedly have this Houthi missile coming out of Yemen being launched at Saudi Arabia. Now, I'm sure it's not the first time that the Houthis have responded to Saudi Arabia, as they have been illegally bombing their territories over and over, such as many other countries have been doing in Syria, Libya, Iraq, so on and so forth. So supposedly all of a sudden, right as all this is going down, they announce that this is suddenly an act of war. So what we have then is the Saudis mobilize and announce that they're going to close down all Yemen ports, including ground, air, and sea, which will put that country to a dead halt. And this is obviously an attack towards Iran, as everybody knows that Yemen is sort of like a proxy body because of the Shia majority in some of the areas in Yemen. And obviously, as that is stated, Saudi Arabia blames Iran for the missile that was launched from Yemen and warns that it is an act of war. Definitely not a shocker at the least. And as I said, the Zionist supporter Donald Trump also blames Iran for the missile fired at Saudi Arabia. So again, that whole coup situation was essentially cleaning house of anybody that was not going to be fully on board, or at least being a thorn in the side of them doing exactly what they want, and that's more war and conflict with Iran, which doesn't necessarily mean straight out war, and I'll get to that in a second. But again, on the situation here, this all comes down because the ISIS plan that the Zionists put into play with Syria, trying to take down Bashar al-Assad, again an opponent of Zionist, which was heavily allied with Iran, heavily allied with the Shia forces in Iraq. And after Russia came in and interfered with the request of the Syrian government, it was all put to a dead halt. And now ISIS is almost a thing of the past in Syria, as the remaining forces are actually being rounded up and regrouped. Now, about this, Russia recently released some satellite photos showing ISIS being allowed to move through US SDF proxy areas in force. Again, that's the 20,000 fighters I was talking about, being allowed to move through the territories controlled by the US proxies and regroup along the Jordan border. What that means is that they're not completely through with the leftover militants. They're getting ready for something else. And with the increasing reports of the Kurds, more specifically the armed militant groups of Kurds, setting up alliances with Saudi Arabia, this starts to remind me of a video that we talked about 9 months ago. Lebanese security forces arrested Mossad operative who was planning to assassinate sister of Lebanese Prime Minister Al-Mayadeen. On November 11th, a Lebanese security official told the Al-Mayadeen TV that Lebanese security forces arrested an operative of the Israeli Mossad intelligence agency in southern Sedan city. The official also told Al-Mayadeen TV that the operative was trying to recruit people to establish a Mossad cell in Sedan in order to conduct terrorist attacks. Now, the Lebanese government has now downplayed this report, but as of now, they still haven't denied or confirmed the claims, so keep that in mind. Israel threatens to act alone against Iranian forces in Syria. Quoting Netanyahu here, Iran is scheming to entrench its military in Syria. He said, adding that Iran wants to deploy its troops in Syria on a permanent basis, which Syria has asked for and is allowing and currently allowing, quoting Netanyahu again, with the declared intent of using Syria as a base from which to destroy Israel. If we stand together, we will achieve it, Netanyahu said, obviously in trying to take out Iranian forces, but, quote, if we have to, we'll stand alone. Iran will not get nuclear weapons. It will not turn Syria into another military base against Israel. And of course, Israel wouldn't want someone to be able to compete with them, as they have around 400 to 500 nuclear weapons that is not registered underneath the same defense treaties that Russia, Iran, China, France, and the other countries that hold nuclear weapons are. So it's basically a rogue state, the same as they try to pin on North Korea. But unfortunately, they receive a special treatment because of the Zionist movement that controls key parts in government institutions such as the United States and other countries that do hold the majority power when it comes to issues like that. The defense minister also came out and said, we will not allow Iranian presence in Syria. The minister explained his stance by adding, we will not allow Syria to become a Shiite frontline against the state of Israel. The reason that they point that out is because they continue to try to make it seem like a Shiite versus Sunni internal struggle, but in reality, Israel and the Zionists are the ones that are fueling that to try to divide their enemies to maintain a dominant advantage over them. That Shia crescent bullshit is again just to promote that type of ideology. The vast majority of Muslims in the Middle East can coexist together rather peacefully, and they have when there was an outside intervention trying to stir the mix by pushing in radical jihadists and Wahhabists and Salafists from Saudi Arabia and other countries where they have raised up this type of radicalism. Just a few days ago, we also had Saudi Crown Prince say that Iran's Ayatollah is the new Hitler. Sound a little bit familiar? According to Saudi Arabia, they are vowing that their new Islamic alliance will wipe terrorists from the earth. Now, if you know anything about Saudi Arabia, you know who they consider terrorists, which is going to be the exact opposite of terrorist. In most of the case, they consider Hezbollah and Iran in general to be terrorist, which is the viewpoint of Israel, the United States, so on and so forth, which if we know from the past and from Netanyahu's mouth and Trump's mouth themselves, as we've shown here on this channel before, this supposed Islamic alliance is actually a Wahhabist Zionist alliance between Israel which leads to no surprise as Israel threatens to destroy all Iranian facilities in Syria within 40 kilometers of the Golan Heights. And if we remember correctly, we still have US-backed FSA and Israeli-backed ISIS. I mean, just ISIS, totally not Israeli-backed or anything like that, even though they have medical facilities where they've been filmed treating ISIS and treating the FSA as well, has been there since the beginning of the war in Syria and have never once attacked Israel. And coincidentally, the U.S. forces opt to stay in Syria to limit Iran-Assad influence, despite their previous statement saying that they were in Syria simply to combat ISIS. Once again, proof that this was just a sham. And again, not surprising that the urge to surge still remains as the U.S. military in the Middle East grows 33% in 4 months. The 40,000 troops in the Middle East have grown to 54,000, a rise of 33% according to the Department of Defense, the largest U.S. troop deployment in the region in the past 5 years. So definitely some increase in manpower, and that likely means an increase in operations in the near future. We also had some pretty astounding statements about the U.S. buffer zone in the northeastern Syria and land bridge from Tehran to Beirut. Now, if you don't know what that is, we've talked about it here on the channel before. It's the connection between Syria, Iraq, and Iran. It's this supply connection that has been going on since the 70s between these three key allies. Now, after ISIS was released back in 2011, this cut that road off, and recently in early 2017 that was reconnected, and thus the US responded by launching an assault on ISIS supposedly with the Kurdish forces to cut off that route that was previously being held by ISIS. Now after that, and after that has failed recently, after the advances of the SAA and the Iraqi army, more specifically the Popular Mobilization Forces, which are not necessarily controlled by the Iraqi government, which is still a vassal state of the United States after they puppeted them after the fall of Saddam Hussein, the U.S. came out and said the United States established a new rule of engagement in the east of Euphrates, informing the Russian forces that it will not accept any ground forces, which means the Syrian army and its allies, east of the Euphrates River, and it will bomb any target approaching the east of the river, even if the objective of the ground forces was to pursue ISIS. Which is a direct admission that they will protect ISIS, and also a direct admission that they are an occupying force, that they're not there to stop ISIS, they are there to stop Assad, which is the sovereign government. Which again is no surprise that the US bids to keep supporting the SDF, including the Kurds in Syria, which again is that proxy army that they love to use because it doesn't get their hands as dirty as it would be, such as in 2004 in the invasion of Iraq, which definitely swayed public opinion. Well, in response to this, Iran threatens to increase its missile range and it blames ISIS on US and Israel. Definitely no doubt on that statement, as they are quoted here saying the intelligence services of the United States and Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United Emirates and certain other countries created Daesh to overthrow the Syrian administration. That is according to the Brigadier General Hossein Salami, which I highly agree with, and that statement can be proven with facts. Just go look at the evidence. We have plenty of it on our channel, and it's all around the internet.
I have determined that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
Then we had the bombshell with the FBI saying that Flynn was lying about ties to Israel, not Russia. Yes, the Russian probe came out and showed that Flynn and the Trump establishment was colluding with none other than Israel, not Russia. Go figure, right? But again, this isn't being covered in the media. And go figure that this was Israel asking Flynn to ask Russia to delay their vote, or at least abstain from the vote condemning Israeli settlements that was pushed through after Obama and the Hillary administration did not win. They felt betrayed, so they went ahead and allowed that vote to go through. Usually they're the ones to veto it because of the United States' awesome veto power that they have in the United Nations. So again, that was a position of fear, not a position of power from Israel. Again, we have to keep these people in perspective. They're not gods. They are just people with greater intentions to benefit themselves and no one else. Obviously, that's the case. We had Iran and China come out saying that they're going to seek different trade paths that negate the US dollar. They don't want to touch the US dollar. This is something that you see before a war. You always want to get rid of any possible assets that you have that are tied with the country that you're about to go to war with. So this is to be expected. Then we had the official announcement yesterday, and I'll go ahead and let you listen to that now.
But today we finally acknowledge the obvious, that Jerusalem is Israel's capital. This is nothing more or less than a recognition of reality. It is also the right thing to do. It's something that has to be done. That is why, consistent with the Jerusalem Embassy Act, I am also directing the State Department to begin preparation to move the American Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This will immediately begin the process of hiring architects, engineers, and planners so that a new embassy, when completed, will be a magnificent tribute to peace.
So after that, we had Netanyahu coming out and saying Trump's Jerusalem speech is similar to the founding of Israel, which if we keep up with history, we will know is because of the pressure of the Zionist movement on the British government to create the Balfour Declaration that came into fruition after World War II and the Holocaust, something that was needed to gain public support for the move. So if we're going to go by those words, Netanyahu is likening this to a second Balfour Declaration. So what does that mean? Only time will tell. So after this, we had Hezbollah's Nasrallah back a call for a new Palestinian intifada, as well as Hamas leaders, which equated Trump's speech as a declaration of war. We had the IDF saying that 2 rockets were launched from Gaza amid violent protest over Trump's Jerusalem decision, which could be seen as a natural response, but we have to take into consideration that Hamas has been infiltrated by the Mossad for years, so we can never be 100% sure on that. We had the Iraqi forces threaten to attack U.S. military in Iraq over the Jerusalem decision, which more specifically is the Hezbollah faction in Iraq, which has been attacked by the US several times by, quote, accidents, but they never appear to be that way. We also had the Chinese foreign minister come out and say, quote, we support an independent Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital. This has been the Chinese position for a while now, but them coming out and reaffirming that this is their position even after that bold statement by Trump, as well as the concern coming out of Moscow, France, and just about every country that's not the United States and Israel, only reinstates how important and how serious this decision truly is. And like I said, this is something that's been in the works, and it seems like it's being rammed down the gutter right now, especially with the moves in Saudi Arabia to move out any of the opposition that are not completely on board with Israel or 100% pro-Israel, that have ties with, say, the Clintons, and that whole group of people have been pushed out of Saudi Arabia, if not killed in several situations.
I heard today Iran's President Rouhani's claim that Israel is behind the protests in Iran. It's not only false, it's laughable.
Now, the more I read into and watch the news coverage of these protests going on in Iran, the more it seems like a copy and paste color revolution that we've seen carried out by the CIA and the Mossad countless times over the past few decades. And if I had to describe it in one sentence, I would call it misrepresented, dramatized, and astroturfed.
And unlike Rouhani, I will not insult the Iranian people. They deserve better. Brave Iranians are pouring into the streets. They seek freedom, they seek justice, they seek the basic liberties that have been denied to them for decades. Iran's cruel regime wastes tens of billions of dollars spreading hate. This money could have built schools and hospitals. No wonder mothers and fathers are marching in the streets. The regime is terrified of them, of their own people. That's why they jail students. That's why they ban social media. But I'm sure that fear will not triumph, because the Iranian people are smart, they're sophisticated, they are proud. Today they risk everything for freedom. Sadly, many European governments watch in silence as heroic young Iranians are beaten in the streets. That's just not right. And I, for one, will not stay silent. This regime tries desperately to sow hate between us, but they won't succeed. And when this regime finally falls, and one day it will, Iranians and Israelis will be great friends once again. I wish the Iranian people success in their noble quest for freedom.
Now, I think the most ironic and hypocritical thing is that there's not a single sentence that Bibi Netanyahu uttered that could not be represented by himself and the Israeli government, and you would be hard-pressed not to find a single sentence in his entire speech that could not be turned around and framed right back into his face. Furthermore, it is completely devoid of facts and is pushing this narrative that we will get into in the rest of this video. So let's look at what the media is pushing here. I'm just going to go ahead and run through some of these articles and read it and then give you my opinion on it. Policemen shot dead in chaotic Iran protest. Report says at least 13 killed in all. This is Fox News. We also know it's going to be an outlet of Zionist propaganda. We know that Fox is actually owned by Zionists. We have Breitbart, which was literally created in Israel, saying that at least 12 killed in Iran as protests against the Islamic regime continue. You'll notice how they love the word regime, and this was a common term that's always going to be used as they push for something like regime change in a country that's against their political will. We have Yahoo News reporting that Trump says time for change in Iran. Again, another hint at that regime change is going to build up to that. This is nothing. Defiant Iranian President Hassan Rouhani makes light of protests that have left 12 people dead in a bid to quell the uprising. So what this is they're trying to frame it as these protests don't mean anything, that what the people want don't mean anything, and we're just trying to quell the uprising. That is not it at all. In fact, this is a good time to interject and to explain what this protest really is. So I'm going to put a hold on the articles here, and I'm going to explain that to the best of my ability. I will have links in the description below where you can verify this information and look into it yourself. I don't want you to trust what I'm saying. I want you to do your own research. So all in all, these protests started out with a handful of people, maybe a few hundred at best, which is the same thing that happened in most of the Arab Spring countries, and they were for real things such as the economic crisis that has been brought on by sanctions on the Iranian government, for supposed breaks in the Iranian nuclear deal, which is completely falsified and void of facts. That is verifiable. You cannot present a case where the Iranian government has broken the Iranian nuclear deal. It is completely for the purpose of political pressure and Iran's legal support of Hezbollah. Now, of course, there are legitimate protests that are going down, and they are for legitimate reasons for the most part, but just like in Arab Spring, you had interjected dozen here, dozen there of people rallying up the crowds and creating certain angles to give to the foreign Western media to push a certain narrative. Now, as the days went on, these protests definitely did grow into thousands of people, but in no shape or form did it match to the public support of the government, which was held just a day ago, that had thousands of people in one location at one time, where we had video and photo evidence of that, whereas in the anti-support, we have only seen shoddy camera angles that show maybe a few dozen people at best that are calling for the fall of the government, which conveniently is being called the regime, such as in Syria, Libya, Yemen, so on and so forth. But I digress, and I'll get into that more in a second. So we go back to Breitbart again. UN Europe silent on Iran uprising. Trump, Netanyahu voice support for protest. Of course, Trump and Netanyahu will voice their support for these protests as to create the illusion that they're supporting a greater uprising as they did in Syria, Libya, Yemen, which were ultimately foreign-backed proxy armies that were Wahhabist militants and radical Islamists that were funneled out of Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and other parts of the world that ultimately were just foreign combatants controlled by the Western governments who had their agents in place. This can be confirmed, this can be verified, with the intention of overthrowing the legitimate government that had majority support, unlike the Western spin that was trying to prove otherwise. And about Europe, it's kind of funny because they say they're silent on it, but just like the rest of the West, they are also pushing this narrative as well. So we have Germany call on Iran to allow peaceful protest. There has been peaceful protest, and they always allow peaceful protest. It is just when security forces were attacked, the same as it happened in Syria, where the security forces were attacked by these radical Wahhabist and paid militants. There's proof that this came out of Qatar at that time in Syria. So I will not doubt that it will likely come to fruition that these were foreign agents as well. And now we have had Iran coming out and stating that as the news continues to roll out. We have the Times of Israel saying Israel assesses Iran's protest could come to threaten regime. Again, we have that regime word being used and pushing the whole idea of regime change. There's the Jerusalem Post saying Iran regime will use necessary force to suppress protest, says experts. It's always funny how they can use words out that people say and try to spin them in a negative light, when if you read it in a certain context, all necessary force can be seen as, yes, if people are being shot, we have to send armed security forces to combat the people that are shooting officers officers, as in the same light, if nobody's being shot, they're just going to send peaceful containment officers to make sure that it doesn't get out of hand, which is the exact same thing that happens here in the States. I can give you 100 examples over the past 5 years alone in the United States. What about France? What about Germany? What about all over Europe? There is no difference between those protests that break out in all of these places and that are happening in Iran. It doesn't mean that they're pushing for a regime change. The only regime change is going to be co-opted by the West to try to push that narrative to get U.S. intervention or Israeli intervention or Western intervention, or to push some kind of proxy narrative that I will get to in a moment. And I have been pressing because of the Kurds that are allied with the Kurds in Iran, and they hold the territory that's conjoined with Iran in northern Syria. So we have that to pay attention to. Let's continue to read these articles here. Iran tested by its own citizens, says Haley. Again, this is another way to twist that word. Of course, Iran is going to be tested by its own citizens, and it should within a fairly democratic system. But as the way it's being portrayed here, it's saying that Iran is fighting against its citizens, which is not necessarily true. Although there is corruption in all government, that is just the nature of government in itself. It is not to the point to where it's a dictatorship over its own citizens. That is a false narrative that has been pushed year in and year out by the Zionists, by the warhawks on Wall Street. You name it, it's been going on over and over again. This is nothing new. Trump calls for change in Iran, sides with protesters, and bloody street battles. Again, we're trying to build that picture that this is the revolters versus the government. That is not true. Go and look. I've been hard-pressed to find true fighting battles between the government that you couldn't go and look and say like Ferguson, Jefferson, or all these other protests in the United States that didn't look any different. Tear gas and things like that, yes. Bonfires and cars on fire, a few buildings smashed in, but nothing more severe than that happens in the States, France, Germany, Europe, you name it. Nothing like they're trying to push here. It's not even to the level that it was in Syria yet, or even Ukraine, where we had paid snipers to shoot protesters and the government. Another Israeli media outlet saying, will they get U.S. support this time? Again, they're referring to the 2009 protests, which actually was more fluent than this. There was actually a larger protest going on, and less came of that than what I think they're trying to push now in the Zionist desperate measures as they lose control in this area to some extent. But again, they're pushing that narrative of regime change with every article that they put out. We have Reuters saying Iranian protesters attack police station, raise stakes in unrest. Again, they try to paint this picture that this whole place is a war going on, it's a war zone, chaos in the streets, and it simply isn't to that extent. Yes, there are a few cities that protests are still ongoing, but again, I stress that it is no different than any other protests we've seen in the past, and in no way is it a overtake of the government by a grassroots revolution. There are two parties that are wanting to see real change, and the Iranian government has responded to that. In fact, let me find the article where it says the Iranian president reportedly vows to solve the economic issues amid ongoing protests. This is what we saw in 2012 with Bashar al-Assad when the first protest happened in Arab Spring, where he said he was going to appease the demands, and he did. He created a democratic government, creating the first elections, and made real steps towards what the protesters wanted. The true protesters, the small amount that were not proxy armies and were not trying to fight the government, they were there to actually get change. So we see the government giving leeway to those people that want actual change and that are legitimately grassroots upset about the economic crisis. Again, I think that is largely caused by the sanctions that are put on Iran by the West, unjustifiably, but at least the Iranian government is adhering to those people, just like Bashar al-Assad did in that time. But in no shape or form do the people want real regime change. Of course, there's people that want to see a different type of government system or different political leaders in charge. That is going to happen in any political system, but a bloody overthrow of the current establishment is not what the people truly want overall. And again, this is the media twisting it as they have over and over and over again. So we have the Iranian deputy governor accuse foreign agents of deaths of protesters. And if we actually read into it, it says no shots were fired by the police and security forces. We have found evidence of enemies of the revolution, Takfiri militant groups, and foreign agents in the clash. So now we have the government coming out and stating that these are foreign agents. Again, we take everything they say with a grain of salt, but again, we have the same thing going down, which has been proven over and over and over again. So why would the Iranian government lie this time? And what makes us want to trust the Western government this time around? I don't, and I don't think that anyone should. Now, I really think the line is starting to be drawn on this time around because Russia doesn't want another ground war. They don't want another serious situation. So I think they're putting their standpoint on this event before it escalates to that point, with the foreign minister coming out and saying that any outside interference in Iran is inadmissible. So yes, I do think that the West is pushing this foreign regime change, but again, the East is stepping down and saying it's not going to happen the same way it's been happening. We're here to stand by our allies. We have economic assets. We have trade assets. We have every reason to defend these people, and we're not going to go for it anymore. So that is something definitely to look into and to watch for as this progresses. Now, like I said earlier, we have the Jerusalem Post reporting that Kurds in Iran expect U.S. intel community support against the regime, which they're again referring to Iran, which I think is a very important factor and really the only way that the West could push any kind of ground forces in Iran. Now, if we look here at this map, the yellow portion is controlled by the Kurds currently, which is Western back, which is going to be the U.S. and Israel, so on and so forth, other Western countries, including Europe. And this is connected from North Syria all the way to North Iraq, and it is connected and conjoined with Iran, which has large support, as there are large portions of Kurds that are living in this area that could possibly be supportive of some sort of ground force or overturn of the government. Now, I'm not speaking on behalf of all Kurds, as I have known on behalf of Kurds that I know personally that say this is not what the Kurds want. The Kurds just want to be either Syrians, they want to be a part of Iraq, or they want to be a part of Iran, Turkey, so on and so forth. But there are still some groups, especially that are being raised from a younger age, to be indoctrinated into that we need our own homeland mentality that they're doing with, say, younger Israelis, that Zionist mentality that we need our own homeland. We have to take this land for our own, so they can manipulate those groups of people to push an agenda. The Greater Israel Project or the Odin Yanan Plan is a great example of that. So again, I don't know if that's going to be possible, but it is theoretically possible that this is an option for the West to push on top of this neo-Arab Spring thing that they have going on in Iran right now. Again, I don't think that Iran will be weak enough to topple in the way that they did Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, and Yemen, as we saw example in Syria when Russia came to their support. But it is definitely something that could destabilize Iran to the point to where we could see larger moves on the playing field. So we have to be wide awake, our eyes wide open as all this unfolds, and watch out for false flags and distractions that are inevitably going to be coming down the pipe, as evidence has been seen in the past over and over.
As we strengthen friendships all around the world, we are also restoring clarity about our adversaries. When the people of Iran rose up against the crimes of their corrupt dictatorship, I did not stay silent. America stands with the people of Iran in their courageous struggle for freedom.
And if you truly stayed with the people of Iran, the vast majority actually came and protested against these protests that were largely fueled by outside foreign intervention that can be proven now.
I am asking Congress to address the fundamental flaws in the terrible Iran nuclear deal. My administration has...
And as soon as they do repeal that, that's when they go after regime change, just like they tried in Syria, just like they were successful in Libya and Iraq, so on and so forth.
From the outside, this was an innocent-looking compound. It looks like a dilapidated warehouse. But from the inside, it contained Iran's secret atomic archives locked in massive files. Actually, they're a little bigger than this. A few weeks ago, in a great intelligence achievement, Israel obtained half a ton of the material inside these vaults. And here's what we got. 55,000 pages. Another 55,000 files on 183 CDs.
Okay, now, before I actually tell you why all this incriminating stuff he's pointing out is absolutely a joke and is hilarious and is insane, let's talk about why he's doing this. Because right now, Donald Trump made this announcement that he's revisiting the Iran nuke deal to see if he wants to pull out of it. And we all know that they want out of it. Zionists want out of it. Anyone connected with Israel wants out of it. Why does Israel want out of it? It prevents Israel and the United States from attacking Iran. Why? Because it takes away the reason for attacking them. WMDs. Because the United States has its people. Anyone that signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which is the Iran nuclear deal, is inside Iran, having their people on all the facilities, all the different places, and monitoring and making sure a total clampdown police state on Iran's programs to prevent them from enriching uranium or researching and developing nuclear warheads. That's what the entire deal was about, and in return they got money and they got sanctions lifted. So today I reread the entire Iran nuke deal, and I've revised my opinion on why they want it gone. Originally, I was saying that the main reason is it prevents Israel from attacking because the United States would have to defend them. Now, if you read the deal and glancing and you read Article 3, yes, it does in spirit insinuate that. But technically, they don't even have to follow that. They don't have to follow that guideline. So I'm like, I got to reread this whole thing. So rereading the entire thing, what happens? Well, they have their people in Iran. They have monitors on the ground. There's no way Iran can pull off building a hidden WMD or a warhead or anything like that. So there's no way they can justify attacking Iran with the classic WMDs, just like they tried to do in Syria with gassing, Libya with gassing as well, Iraq with whatever WMDs George Bush had in mind then. They can't do that. Because they have their people. They are signed in this document stating that they're monitoring. So if they do that, well, it was their fault? They missed the warheads? No. It's a joke. That can't be passed on to the international community. Russia wouldn't have that. In fact, Russia and China are a part of that deal. So no, they can't implement a real conflict with Iran without pulling out of the Iran nuke deal, because then they can say, oh, as soon as we pulled out, they hopped right back onto making WMDs and it's all hell loose. Now we have to go in because they want to blow up the world with a handful of nukes. It's the same thing they've been trying to pull with North Korea, and we see what's happening there now, and we'll see how that plays out. But that's the real main true reason they want to pull out of the Iran nuke deal. Now, scooting it back to this absolutely hilarious game show type display, which reminds us of the big bomb picture that he held up with the cartoon bomb, saying it's 90% done and they're months away from blowing up the world. It's the same show. The reason they have to do these shows is for public opinion, for public pressuring. So when Donald Trump comes out and say, oh, it's such a bad deal, they're working behind our back and they're still working to make nuclear weapons, and they're not going to mention that they have their own people in there monitoring the whole situation and it's nearly impossible, then there won't be as a public outcry when we pull out. And then there's going to be harboring for war. There's going to be down with Iran. Let's make that into a big glass plane. Let's just level the whole place out. That mentality will be breached up. The same mentality that was brought up in 2003 with Iraq. The same mentality that was there in Libya, not as strong. And the same mentality in Syria, definitely not as strong in that case. But they're trying to go for that again. They're trying the same old, is this game show mentality. Putting on a show for the people so they can continue their world domination. It's as simple as that. That's why they're doing this. Now, I said I would debunk this, and it is really as simple as this. If we actually go back and look, Haran, that should be, say, Israel lied or America lied. That's what should be up there. I might put that as the video title there. But first of all, they show all these documents supposedly that were pulled out of, as Bibi said, a dilapidated warehouse in the middle of the night a few weeks ago and was sent to Israel. So they're trying to make us believe that whole notion, which is hilarious. But even with that, this is what all the documents are from. The supposed Project Ahmad, which was from 1999 to 2003. And if I remember correctly, the Iran nuke deal was not implemented in 2003. So they're pulling out evidence from over a decade ago, proving that this is Iran's plans now. Everything that's shown in this presentation is 2003 or older. Everything. All these presentations, documents, it's all 2003 according to their own evidence that they're providing. And you can look at the evidence where they show this cone saying that it's Iran still planning to make nuclear warheads. Well, it's the old design. The new design has this little baby bottle feature, and this is what actual missile designers and nuclear physicists are pointing out on Twitter. People that are not even pro-Iran coming out and saying that it's an absolute joke. Even this Josh Pollock fella, who happens to be a nuclear and a biological weapons specialist, came out and said it's an absolute joke. And some of the evidence was brought up in 2005, 2007, and 2011, and it was a joke then, and it's still a joke now. It's all the same evidence. Remember the death laptop in 2005 when they tried to say that that was proof that Iran was still trying to create nuclear warheads? Yeah, this is the same evidence. The exact same evidence that's being brought up, and it was debunked then, and it's still debunked. It didn't change. Nothing in this is incriminating towards Iran. Nothing is illegal. Nothing is new. And even if that evidence that they're showing is true, it changes absolutely nothing because it was 2003 and prior. So it changes nothing. It only aims at manipulating a moldable public mind that doesn't know any better. It doesn't read into the actual evidence that they're providing. So it's all a joke, it's all a show, and it's all implemented towards getting a war with Iran, which will ultimately lead to a larger conflict with larger nations. And I don't have to explain to you what that is. So we've been talking about this for over a year now, how they're trying to get out of the Iran nuke deal, and there's been two different ways that they've been going at it. One's the Palestinian approach, and the other is this game show, look at the bombs that Iran is trying to make approach. They're doing both right now. If you go watch our video, Trump's plans for Israel, Palestine, and Iran, which you got to remember, Trump was put in place to push Israel's agenda. That's why he was there. He's 100% for Israel, 1000% for Israel, quoting him himself. This is why Trump's there, to push for a war with Iran. And the first step to doing that is getting rid of the Iran nuke deal, because that is their only trump card in preventing Trump from actually pushing for a war with Iran. Now with Palestine, they're moving the embassy to Jerusalem. That's to incite riots. That's to incite more chaos and conflict, to give them a reason to occupy more of the Western Bank, to continue to kill people in Gaza, which they've been doing on the daily, killing dozens of people in cold blood, so they can completely integrate Palestine into Israel, to totally take it off the map completely. And like I said, the other approach is aimed to creating a war with Iran, to weaken them, to prevent them from actually doing anything about them integrating and annexing the rest of Palestine. So just like we stated a week ago, this show, this charade that Israel was putting on with this supposed evidence was all just a pretext to provide the United States a reason to pull out of the Iran nuclear deal. So as planned, Trump comes out today and announces that the United States is pulling out of the Iran deal, stating numerous lies and once again reverting back to that information from last week by Israel as the main reason why they're pulling out of that deal. Now, as we stated many times in the past, the main reason the United States and Israel want to pull out of the deal is to pursue war with Iran. And the secondary reason is to continue to annex Palestine without any consequence. So again, as soon as they pull out of there, they're now going to say that Iran is once again pursuing those weapons, and since their inspectors are not there, then they can claim the, oh, they did it behind our back scenario. Now, the EU and some of these other signing countries really don't want this to happen because they don't want to be a part of a world war. And Iran has agreed to stay within the deal as long as the rest of the signing countries, which include the European Union, France, Germany, Russia, China, and the like, as long as they maintain the deal, they're willing to stay inside of it. But if that weren't to happen, Iran says they're ready to pursue their nuclear weapons. And I don't disagree with that route of action because that's the only thing that prevents larger countries from pursuing a war or coming in and overthrowing their government. Because with that scenario, the same scenario with North Korea, that creates a suicide mission for anyone that really wants to take over that country. Because in this day and age, nuclear weapons are just defensive measures to prevent the overthrow of governments, because all the governments that the United States has overthrown in the past few decades has had weapons of mass destruction, but then removed them under international and US pressure. The only exception being Syria, because they were backed up by Iran and Russia that prevented a full takeover and overthrow of the Syrian government. So again, I agree with that measure if the Iran deal falls apart altogether. Now, Israel already knows this, and they're doing other countermeasures, and it appears they have another method of getting what they want. As of late, we've had a few revelations as to how Israel manipulates the United States to try to keep this open secret a secret. Now, Grant Smith at globalresearch.ca put together an article covering these revelations, and I'm going to read through that right now. Highlighting the important parts here. Revealed on June 18th that 4 sitting U.S. presidents, beginning with Bill Clinton, signed secret letters agreeing to never publicly discuss Israel's undeclared nuclear arsenal. According to Antis, President Trump aides felt blindsided by Israeli Ambassador Ron Dermer's urgent demand to sign a 4th letter. That would make Trump the 4th one to sign that secret agreement. Only a small number of senior American officials in the previous 3 administrations even knew about the existence of such letters. Though said not to specifically mention Israel's arsenal, Israeli leaders interpret the letters as binding American pledges not to publicly mention Israel's nuclear weapons or press Israel to sign the treaty on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. So what that basically says is it's a pledge, basically just the president, bypassing Congress, bypassing all of his staff and saying, you know what, I'm going to agree to bypass all that and put a gag on any information being leaked without taking the say-so of any other American before they do it, even though that implements all other Americans that are employed under the government. So continuing on here, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has FBI documented personal connections to Israel's nuclear weapons program smuggling operations. Yes, there's been smuggling operations. Look at the Bush administration issues with the missing nukes. Was particularly concerned about newly elected President Barack Obama. We knew there was some beef there between Obama and Benjamin Netanyahu because there was conflict of parties there. On February 9, 2009, veteran White House reporter Helen Thomas asked if Obama knew of any country in the Middle East that had nuclear weapons. Obama dodged answering the question before finally replying that he didn't want to speculate. Speaking in Prague in April 2009, Obama called for strengthening the NPT, which is that same denuclearizing agreement. However, by May 2009, Obama yielded to Israeli pressure and signed an updated version of the secret Israeli gag letter, according to Etnos. So, seems like they've been getting to a lot of these presidents, basically taking our leadership by the balls. On September 6, 2012, Obama's Department of Energy, in consultation with the Department of State, issued a secret directive called Guidance on Release of Information Relating to the Potential for an Israeli Nuclear Capability. What a title on that one right there. Also known as WNP 136, making it a crime for any U.S. government employee or contractor to publicly communicate any information, even from the public domain. So stuff that's already known and out there about Israel's nuclear weapons program. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? There's no way that can be legal under the U.S. Constitution. But we'll get to that in the rest of this article. Etnos notes that Israel already had 3 nuclear devices by 1967, but does not examine how a country with no infrastructure to produce highly enriched uranium managed to assemble such weapons, which leads to outside countries helping them, and what country that was allied with Israel at that time that could supply said uranium and infrastructure to create such weapons? That's the United States. Oh, but Iran is 80-90% 95% ready to nuke the world. They're on the verge. We have proof. Look at our suitcases of CDs that are so outdated that we found in a shack. That's proof. But no. We can have it, and it's fine. We don't even have to be under the NPT. That's totally illegal. But just don't talk about it, and nobody even realizes it happens. Just put a ball gag on the president, and we're all good. Because the U.S. president is what's in control of the UN anyway. The U.S. president is just a puppet of Israel, and that's the case 99% of the time as of late. According to CIA and FBI files, Israel colluded with Pennsylvania nuclear processing plant administrators, 2 connected to Israeli intelligence, and 3 with strong connections to the Zionist Organization of America to divert enough U.S. government-owned, highly enriched uranium to build several devices in the 1960s. So there's your answer there. The pillage of NUMEC, a privately held, thinly capitalized Atomic Energy Agency contractor, left behind a toxic mess and hundreds of poisoned, uncompensated victims. Uncompensated because what? They can't admit that that's happening in Israel because they're having to sign these secret letters. So screw you, there's a ball gag, you can't get help. Now here's the gist of it all that I'm getting at with it being illegal under this requirement known as the AECA by any U.S. president. U.S. presidents, upon learning that the non-NPT member is trafficking in nuclear weapons technology and testing nuclear weapons, are supposed to publicly notify Congress and to cut off U.S. foreign aid to said country. And you know how much money we're currently giving to Israel every single year? $6.3 billion. That's why there's got to be a ball gag, right? So we gotta keep supplying the leech with the money. Israel has not signed the NPT, also continually smuggles nuclear weapons making technology from the US. And just to reinstate that, the president can comply with the AECA, as was done in the case of waivers for Pakistan. But not surprisingly, no president has ever complied with any of the provisions of the AECA regarding Israel, including waivers. Again, not so surprising because they have us by the balls. For anyone that doesn't understand that premise when I say that the United States is a proxy of Israel. It's not the other way around. In May of 2018, the U.S. District Court of Appeals of D.C. upheld a lower court's ruling that U.S. citizens have no standing to sue the president and executive agencies complicit in failing to enforce the AECA. So they're basically saying, well, rules don't apply to the leaders? Come on now, you know better than that. And they even reaffirm that with this statement saying the Department of Justice argued that the president has sole authority whether or not to recognize Israel's nuclear weapons program as a fact. Because with that statement, they're basically saying it doesn't matter if it's true or not. It's up to the president to decide that. And obviously they're not going to openly admit that because that means that they would have to enforce the AECA legally. Now, excluding clandestine U.S. aid funneled through black budgets, which they do exist, U.S. presidents and Congress have given an inflation-adjusted sum of $222.8 billion to Israel since the Symington and Glenn amendments became law in 1976. So that's at least $222.8 million of illegally funded money to an illegal apartheid state that does not follow any rules or regulations set by our government or international governments, which is a terrorist act which requires impeachment and the highest penalties against all the officials complicit with this. So right there is justification enough to take action against our current government, which are tyrants in place. But who cares, right? Who cares that we break laws on a daily basis? It's just insane. But finishing off the article, since Bill Clinton became the first known U.S. president to sign a secret letter to Israel, inflation-adjusted aid to Israel has grown to $99.9 billion. It's just chump change, huh? I mean, just that alone is double the UK defense bill last time I checked. And we're sending that to a terrorist country that doesn't follow international or local laws at all? Makes no sense to me.